New America would like to welcome you to our virtual event. The program will begin momentarily. While we are waiting, I want to review a few housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded, and a recording will be posted to the New America events page within 48 hours after the event. Attendees will be in listen-only mode, and you will not be able to be seen or heard by your fellow attendees or panelists. Therefore, we encourage you to share your comments and questions in the Slido box located to the right of the video. Closed captioning is available by hovering over the video and clicking CC at the bottom of the video. You can purchase your copy of the book by clicking on Purchase the Book, which can be found at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you encounter any issues during the event, please contact events@newamerica.org. Thank you for joining us. We will begin momentarily.
Good afternoon. I'm Anne Marie Slaughter, the CEO of New America. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's conversation. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us for what will be a thoughtful and deeply human discussion about artificial intelligence, how it is already shaping our lives, our works, our relationships, the ways we live, learn, and play. New America was founded to tackle moments like these, moments of enormous change. We're a think and action tank dedicated to generating big ideas and bold solutions for the America we are becoming. And one of the most pressing questions of our time is not whether AI will transform society, it already is, but how we choose to shape that transformation. That question has been central to our Future of Work and Innovation Economy Initiative, which we call FOE for short. FOE is hosting today's discussion. Working at the intersection of economics, workforce, and technology development, FOE's mission is straightforward, but ambitious. Advance policies and practices that link technological progress and expanded economic security and well-being for workers and families. FOE asks hard questions about who benefits from technological innovation, who bears the costs, and how we can design policies and institutions that work for a renewed and thriving American middle class. Few tech moments have animated those themes more than today's global AI zeitgeist. AI is a force that is touching every stage of life, from early childhood education to mid-career transitions to aging. It raises questions not just about technology, but about power, agency, creativity, care, and the health of our democracies and planet. Which brings me to today's conversation and to our remarkable guest. We are delighted to welcome back to New America's virtual stage, Kay Firth Butterfield. Kay is a fellow with FOE and one of the world's leading voices on responsible and ethical AI. She has been thinking seriously about the human implications of AI long before it was fashionable or profitable to do so. She was one of the world's first chief AI ethics officers. A chief AI ethics officer is not a job that could have really even been imagined even 10 years ago. She was also the inaugural head of AI at the World Economic Forum, where she helped shape global norms and governance frameworks for AI at the highest levels. While at WEF, she led several responsible AI initiatives, including one in collaboration with New America and FOE's founder and managing director, Shailen Jyotishi. That one examined how AI development and deployment can be steered to enhance worker voice, well-being, and job quality. What makes Kay's work so compelling and so aligned with New America's mission is that she refuses to separate technology from humanity. New America has developed a practice of people-centered public problem solving. That's a mouthful, but it means looking at policy design and implementation, technology, networks of best practice, advocacy, and narrative, starting with people. Kay's work does the same. She starts with humans. Her new book, Coexisting with AI, Work, Love, and Play in a Changing World, was released at Davos this year. The book, again, insists on humanity and technology, that humans can and must work with technology to shape our own future together. It's neither a utopian hype nor a dystopian warning, unlike many books of this kind. It offers specialists and non specialists a roadmap and an invitation to think together. And it gives us an ethos to guide that thinking, one that is clear eyed, human centered, and grounded in lived experience from around the world. So, with that, it is my great pleasure to welcome Cave Earth Butterfield and to invite all of you into this conversation. I will hand off to our moderator, Shailen Jatishi, to dive in. Thank you once again, and I look forward to the discussion.
Well, Kay, on behalf of New America, I'd like to echo Anne Marie's comments. Welcome back to New America's virtual stage. Really excited to have you with us once again. And as Anne Marie mentioned in her opening remarks, really have a conversation around your new book, which are more broadly animating themes that we've been focusing on quite deeply in our own work here in the Future of Work and Innovation Economy Initiative and well beyond that. So welcome again and excited for our discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's always wonderful to have discussions with you, and we've been doing it for a long time now, Shailen.
It has been a while. Well, Kate, I thought to start off, you've just released this book, Coexisting with AI at Davos. Congratulations again. But Anne Marie referenced this in her comments at the outset. You've had a remarkable career yourselves to have gotten to where you are today. To start off, I'd love to share with our audience a little bit about your own journey and how you found yourself in your position that you're in now at the intersection of AI policy and governance.
Yes, well, I think Anne-Marie said long before it was profitable. I think that that's probably the narrative of my career. I was a barrister in the UK, and instead of doing profitable law, I chose to do human rights law, and specifically focus on children or do a lot of work with children. And so I've always had this concern about the human condition and always wanted to help humans. And so that's the sort of golden thread through my career. As a lawyer, you help one or a few humans at the same at any given time. As a professor, which I moved to, you're helping your students, so a few more human beings. And then in the work that I do now, hopefully I am speaking to very many human beings. And this book really is part of that story because what I want is for everybody to read the book, not to make me a lot of money, although that would be great, but because I really feel that at the moment, the narrative about AI, the way we're asked to think about AI, and the way that we are hurtling to our future with AI is very much guided by the few in perhaps rooms like this. And really, everybody needs to have a basic understanding about AI. And if they don't, they can't think about it. They can't think about the policies that they might want to put around it. They can't even protect and guide their children and think about how they work with AI. So we all need an understanding of how AI fits into our lives, and then we can begin to think about how do we shape this going forward. So yes, barrister, judge, professor, And then in 2014, the world's first chief AI ethics officer. And that's 12 years now. I mean, it's been a long time, but we still do keep talking about this, and that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And, your frame around coexisting with AI being something that, certainly the specialists and governments and corporations and so forth are grappling with, but also all of us in our individual capacities as parents, as friends, as individuals navigating the change. So, the coexisting frame I think is really resonant for a number of reasons. And that brings me to the book itself. So, Kate, what motivated you to write this book and why now? What sort of led to this release that we're coming off of? I gather 14 days.
Well, yes, 14 days ago. Well, I suppose the easy answer to that is my husband forced me to. But the but that was it was really because I kept saying everybody needs to understand this. I gave a talk in my local library to people in my village, and about half the audience had heard the word AI, but had no clue how AI was changing the way that they live now and how they might get services in the future. And that reflected the Pew research that we've been seeing and the Edelman research that people had heard of AI, but really didn't understand very much more than that. And if they did, we've seen the numbers of people who fear AI going up. And I really wanted to balance that and say, if you understand, you can then make sensible and important judgments about where you use AI, how you use it in work, how you use it with your children, and maybe things like the child who decides to fall in love with a chatbot, if that child understands that this is just a machine, would they really cleave to it in the same way? I hope not. I may be wrong, but it's challenging us to really think deeply about this is not a new God. This is a machine. This can do fantastic things for us, but also it can be harmful. And we, as humans, need to make the right judgments about how we coexist with it.
Absolutely. What we don't understand, we oftentimes fear. And, we fear places we don't understand. We fear things we don't understand. We fear people we don't understand. And, in that same spirit, I think in this moment, many of us are just trying to understand what AI means. And with that comes some level of precision and clarity in how it can be used. And another factoid about your book, Kay, is that it was actually based not on technical manuscripts, but on Shakespeare. Tell us a little bit about that tie-in.
Well, Shakespeare wrote all the good human stories, didn't he? The fact that we still talk about him and go to see the plays so many years later suggests that he really, understood the core of what makes us human. And if you look at the whole canon of Shakespeare, you could tell all of our human stories going forward with AI. I could rewrite Othello and Romeo and Juliet with an AI lover. And I really wanted to look at the human condition with AI in each of the stages that we have in our lives. And Shakespeare again gave me a great narrative. Jaquay's speech in As You Like It, talks about the seven ages of man. And obviously, Shakespeare was writing in the 16th century, so we have to accept the word man. But that gave me a framework to really say, okay, let's tell the human story of coexistence with AI.
Absolutely. Talk about the convergence of the humanities and the sciences here. And I'm reminded, one of our former colleagues, Tori Bosch, who led a collaboration we had with Slate Magazine and Arizona State University around using fiction as a vehicle for understanding, well, science, sci-fi in particular, as a vehicle for understanding how technology is impacting us. And I guess that's manifested itself in your own book by way of the Shakespeare a sort of foundation. So, Kate, you recently launched your book at Davos, and you have been on the road globally. You've been at a number of global summits, having conversations with all kinds of folks. I'm sure some techno optimists, some pessimists, and all in between. Um, Tell us about your reflections on sort of the reactions that you've seen on your travels as the book has made its debut in Davos and then subsequently thereafter.
Yeah, I think, there were three major things for me apart from the book in January. One was that I was invited to give evidence to the Joint Select Committee on the human rights of the UK Parliament. And they're looking at the impact of AI on our human rights. So totally in my ballpark. And so that was a great privilege, but it also made me really look at the Declaration of Human Rights. And in the book, I've actually looked at the children's rights in conjunction with the UN Convention, and you really sort of see deeply that there are things that AI at the moment is interdicting. So, for example, our right to justice. One of the things that I find whenever I'm in London in Chambers, which is a law office, is that my colleagues will come and they'll say, "Oh, we've got this brief in, and it's full of hallucinations," or I found deep faked evidence come in from the other side in this medical claim, or the hallucinations are either in the case name, the case summary, or it's got the reason for the decision completely wrong. And I've been thinking very deeply about that because if we let those hallucinations into our common law system, common law depends upon decisions being based on previous case law.
Mm.
If instead it's based on hallucinated case law, then that undermines the whole concept of the common law. And so, what are we doing about this, and how do we ensure that our basic human right, which is a right to remedy, to right to justice, actually survives the hallucinations that are getting into our common law? So that was one aspect of my road trip in January.
And
Another sorry, yes.
well, I was just going to say, Kay, for our audience who haven't read the book yet, could you give a little bit of and what are hallucinations and
Oh,
how should we
sure.
be thinking about in the context of a discussion?
Yeah, sure. So hallucinations are where you use a large language model and it gives you a really convincing answer, but the answer is untrue. And so, in the context of law, that would be, as I say, that it tells you about a case, but it's made the name of the case up. So it's not Firth Butterfield versus somebody. The actual case is completely the title's been made up. And then the next stage of a legal case is that you have a little resume of what happened in the case. Often it'll make all of that up too. And then you have the actual judgment that was written by the judge. And you might get all of that made up, or you might just get the name of the case right, the summary of the case right, but somewhere in the judgment, the reason for the judgment is wrong. And so that's why it's so fundamentally dangerous to the legal system, because unless a lawyer, a human lawyer, catches it, then you're going to get a decision based upon something that actually didn't ever exist. And therefore, it runs a coach and horses through the legal system.
Yep, very helpful. I know you're walking us through your reflection journey, but maybe just one follow-up question on hallucinations. In this point in time, have you found hallucinations to have found their ways into other use cases that are just as concerning as the use case with our legal system? I mean, from my standpoint, I've, been the subject and the recipient of hallucinations when it comes to research,
Mhm.
papers that either were LLMs might generate as being authored by myself or my colleagues, or the other side of the coin that were never authored at all.
Yeah.
Any other use cases that you've seen around this hallucination topic?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, research is a great one. And I think that, it comes back to why did I write the book? If you are an undergraduate or even a student in school, and you don't actually know anything about your topic, and you are depending upon an LLM to give you the answer, um, then you can't check it. I mean, it's different perhaps when you're a lawyer and you've been trained and you can go back and you can find the errors. But if you have no training in the subject matter itself, then you're going to accept that it's right
Right.
unless you understand and you have received basic AI literacy training. And we talk about AI literacy all the time. But that tends to be, how do you use the LLM? How do you do prompts? Those sort of things. But basic literacy needs to include it might get it wrong, and you need to be capable of finding that it's wrong. And we're seeing it in business, and I think obviously it's very dangerous everywhere, but it's particularly dangerous in business because um, if you are using it in business and there is a hallucination, that hallucination then actually goes into your proprietary data of your company
Hmm.
and is available for somebody else to pull from in the future. So you're sort of double hallucinating or triple hallucinating.
Yeah.
And that in itself is dangerous because we thought that hallucinations were the province of large language models, but not if they're getting into proprietary data.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for indulging me. When I heard the hallucinations, I immediately it was prompted to just, dive into that right off the bat. But you were saying, so you had this interaction with Parliament around the intersection of AI and
Mhm.
human rights, and you were continuing on from there.
Yeah, sure. So then I was fortunate to go to the conference called the DLD conference in Munich. It's just comes before Davos. And there I was really fortunate to speak to the CEO of the Kinsey Institute. And actually, at the conference, there was quite a lot of negativity or depression about where AI was going. But I think that, he brought this extraordinary human perspective to the conversations that we had, where he said that AI is an not AI, but we are on the cusp as human beings of an existential crisis. And that's because of our loneliness crisis, our inability, it seems, for us to be able to go out and meet people and communicate with people. And I've been thinking deeply about, is there anything we can do about this? And if we cannot bring ourselves to socialize more and make better connections, that's obviously terrible for our democracy, but it's also existential as a crisis for humanity. And AI, as I talk about as in the lover chapter, is a potential problem for us humans because if we can fall in love with an AI instead of going out and making those hard contacts with human beings, then that adds another barrier to, but also a cocoon for us to wrap around ourselves against loneliness.
Absolutely. I may not get the precise stat right, but I had seen in a polling essay recently that something like 1 in 10 high schoolers in the United States have formed a romantic relationship with AI, and this is ChatGPT came out in what 2022, so these are still
Mhm.
really early days, and I believe there was also a report of a marriage that
Yeah.
was arranged between a person and an AI. So, it may seem like science fiction to, folks who haven't been, following the AI space, but, the love chapter, I think, really speaks to that, the very real experiences that people are having, and the loneliness epidemic you mentioned is certainly I think that's such a ubiquitous challenge that stems from the digital age coming from the dot-com boom, let alone the AI zeitgeist that we now find ourselves in. And
Yes,
then,
I think though, Shailin, that it's easier now,
Mhm.
because in many ways it seems to be human. We
Yeah,
know that it's not, and that's again something that I emphasize in the book that we need to understand and our children need to understand. But it can play the part. It's really good at faking being human.
right, right. And to your point of the AI literacy, if we haven't incorporated in our educational system the skills to interpret what is genuine empathetic connection and what isn't for a developing mind, there may not be that discerning ability, latently in the course of discussions. I'll be in Miami next week for the National Applied AI Education Summit, and the focus around AI skill development, I think you're absolutely right. It oftentimes falls short around these bigger picture life skills. We're replicating the same tropes of, financial literacy lacking in our educational system, or thinking about your home economics courses that might have fallen to the wayside in lieu of skill development and workforce development. And with AI, there's still a need for those durable life skills that are just as about working and coexisting with AI as it is using AI to improve your own efficiency and productivity and safety and so forth.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And it is sad that we already have a Wikipedia page that is dedicated to suicides
Mm,
allegedly brought about by AI chatbots.
right.
And I guess that moves me on to Davos, because I was fortunate enough to be invited to be on one of the teams for the annual New York Times debate. And the debate was AI will succeed where humans have failed. And it's
Mm,
online, so go watch it. I won't praise it here. But I was on the humans have lots left to give side, and AI really is just a reflection of us humans because it grows out of our data. It is a thing of our data, and and um, and I didn't really expect it to win in Davos, where
mm,
the whole promenade was given over to AI for this and AI for that and AI for the other. But we did win the debate by a country mile. And I that was different. This is
wow.
my ninth Davos. It was different. The conversation around AI was different. In some parts, it was I was on a panel about AI native governments, which is where you get AI to run whole government departments all by itself. So there was that sort of reach for the stars type of AI, but on the whole, there was a lot of how do you achieve ROI with AI? There was much less AI will cure everything
Mm.
and more what's it curing and how can we use it and how can we make some money out of it because we spent a lot of money. So, and then there was this underlying theme of where do humans fit in?
Wow. Wow. Well, we'll certainly include the link to the debate in our follow-up communication to the audience. It's really fascinating, but also I think it's heartening that the conversations are starting to, it seems, soften and a little bit more of a, a pragmatic, even keel tone around coexisting with AI is starting to take foot even at places like Davos, where, of course, as you know, there's always enthusiasts around the frontiers of industrial revolutions that come to gather, right?
It should be.
So
Yeah, and we have to be enthused.
yeah,
I genuinely believe, and the book, I hope, is a balanced perspective between the things we need to put right and the things that AI can give us. I do genuinely believe that AI can be wonderful for humans, but we have to decide what we want it to do, as opposed to, you know, it rushing at us, which I think most people feel at the moment is coming at me, and how do I use it, and what do I use it, and what jobs are my children going to do in the future? And one of the people on my debate team, she had lost her sister to a pre AI a suicide converse chat, and she one of the things that I think Tristan Harris says is with social media, we encountered AI for the first time. And what learnings do we have to make our relationship of encountering AI a second time now with chatbots any better? And I'm not sure that we have got learnings from that first encounter.
yeah, absolutely. My gosh, it's such a tragic thing to experience, but then being able to sort of glean insights from it to help
Mm,
others. I mean, that's
yeah.
a really difficult thing to draw out. And Kay, your comments actually lead me to my next question here, which is at Davos, where all of these world leaders were gathering, I think all around, not just in the United States, for America and for the America we're becoming, but even globally, there's a hunt for those kinds of insights to make sure that the right balance is struck with regards to policy and governance around AI. And, I wanted to ask you from your vantage point, working internationally and having this very rare vantage point, um, are there any nations or regions that you think are striking the right balance around coexisting with AI? Where are there places that are on the right track that you'd point out?
Well, I think if a lot of places are on the right track
Mm,
in bits. So,
mm,
so for me, the right track, and I'll just be open here. For me, the right track is that we have good governance of AI. Good governance of AI means that we think about how our citizens should be properly protected in relation to some of the adverse effects of AI. So, we regulate seatbelts in cars because cars might harm us. Well, AI might harm us, but in many countries in the world, we don't regulate it at all because want to allow innovation to run.
Mm,
But again, you going back to my car analogy, when we had regulation about speed and brakes and things like that, that actually created enormous amount of innovation in the car industry. So regulation and or good governance doesn't actually equal, in my view, a lack of innovation. And I think if we look at Europe, they certainly don't have as much innovation in AI as we
right.
have. But they have said our citizens are important to us, our values are important to us, and we need to think about what is that right balance between the values that we hold dear and the AI that is created or allowed to be used in the area. And I think that, we're seeing similar things happening across America where lots of different states are regulating bits of AI. Or in Colorado, and yes, it's still under discussion. You're seeing a more holistic approach. So and in America, there's a sort of, it's almost even between Republican states and liberals, Democratic states.
Mm,
And then in some places, they have gone specifically to protecting their children. And I do think that would be a fabulous thing for us to do properly here. You look to Australia and the work that they're doing around social media and how they
mm,
allow children to access social media. And then you can look to the UK, where they have a very comprehensive Online Harms Act. And under it, for example, they are looking to prosecute the what I will call, but it doesn't do it justice, the bikini instance that we saw from an AI system earlier in the year.
yep. Yep, absolutely. And I also think it's helpful to think about in the context of the policy and governance, how nations could work together even in this moment where that seems difficult with AI, with such an infrastructure that is globally connected by default, by design, really, thinking about bilateral or multilateral partnerships for AI governance. Has that concept gone waysided in this environment? Do you think that that is still something that nation states will start to pursue as you said, even at Davos, there's this kind of softening of language, or do you think that this nation for nation approach is what we're going to see more of in the years to come?
Well, I mean, we are seeing a nation by nation
Yeah.
approach at the moment. But next week is the India Summit on AI. And that will bring together leaders from all around the world to talk about AI safety and AI governance and regulation generally. And so there is that work still going on, and China would like to be seen as a leader in that, as would India. Um, the the question is, of course, if America doesn't play a proper part in those discussions, whether actually we can achieve anything globally. And I think that that's where we're seeing, some of the UN efforts stutter. But I don't think that if America isn't playing a part, just as Russia wasn't playing a part, if country isn't playing a part, it doesn't mean to say that we won't still see groupings of countries coming together. But on the other hand, we are seeing countries developing their own sovereign AIs and more rush to do that in the last year. And so now you're seeing sovereign AIs in Switzerland, in Mongolia, in Kyrgyzstan, in Japan, Korea, many different places, so that they are not only cultivating their own language and protecting their own culture, because LLMs are mainly trained on global north literature and study and science. So you are seeing this bifurcation as people are saying, well, what's my alternative to the standard LLM?
Right. Yeah. And for our audience, Kate, could you give a brief primer on sovereign AI and how we should be thinking about that?
So, a sovereign AI is a large language model that has been created by a government or by a number of entities under an umbrella. Um, uh, it's created on uh, the culture and documentations of
Mhm.
that country. And so if you look at Kyrgyzstan or Mongolia, for example, the an ordinary LLM is not going to be surfacing very much about Mongolian culture. And so they felt that they had to build something themselves in order to preserve their culture and to actually have an LLM that understood them.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating. As you know, Kay, a lot of our work in the Future of Work and Innovation Economy initiative here is sort of at the intersection of science and industrial strategy and industrial policy implementation. So these themes are really, I think, vogue for us. Um, but we have lots of ground to cover. So my next question is a little bit about some of what you had mentioned during your Davos reflections, which is, the underbelly when it comes to coexisting with AI. As you mentioned, there's no dearth of concerns that people have for how AI will affect our children, our jobs. I'm reminded of some Pew data from August 2025 in the United States that found that there's no greater gap between what AI experts think and what the public thinks and how AI will impact the way we work. This thing that we spend most of our waking hours in our lives either preparing for by way of schooling and
Mm.
education and doing by way of work. So um, how do you approach concerns about AI in your book and more broadly in your work? How's that showing up for you?
Yes, well, I mean, I think the main thing is that everybody needs to be literate, and we need to give them a hand in being literate. So let me just take the infant. There is a market now for AI-enabled toys for the under sixes, and those toys are sold to us parents as, this will help your kid get ahead, and your kid's going to be living with AI, so give it to them now. And that's all well and good, but there's rarely anything on the box that tells you what the child is going to learn from this interaction with the AI. There is rarely anything on the box that talks about data storage of your children's data, how long they're going to keep it, where it's going to be stored. Often they have voice recognition and facial recognition. And then there's the sort of wider conversation about, well, if your child is cleaving to an AI when they're under six, how are they going to manage those dreadful human beings that make them cry in the playground? And yet, if they don't manage those interactions, then the crisis for humanity becomes writ large. Um, and so and so I do think that things like labeling those sort of toys with the rights, with all the information that a parent might need will help with AI literacy. So I do think that that's something that we should think about doing.
Wow, wow, it's astonishing. And I think about the AI and the LLM tools that could be embedded in video games, that kids might be using, which have even less degrees of visibility from parents, online and so
Yeah.
forth. And my gosh, that is concerning. And I know, Kay, the environmental impacts of AI come up often in your travels. There's this vantage point around the electricity consumption and the concerns that, especially in communities that have data centers, what they're experiencing. And then there's this other side of the coin that is looking at AI as our last shot at addressing climate challenges that other mechanisms haven't been able to slow down
Mhm.
enough. This Cascadian abundance frame has been a policy dialogue here in DC. So how do you see environmental concerns around AI playing into, how does it play out in your book? And then certainly, how do you think we should be thinking about coexisting with AI when there's this environmental tension at the core of it?
Yes, well, of course, one of the problems at the moment is that there is a lot of promise from AI, but we're having to spend the Earth's resources to get to that promise. And so we're really buying into the promise. And if it turns out that the promise is not actually um, comes to fruition, then we have burnt our bridges pretty badly as human beings. And so I was really heartened the other day when I was at a conference just last week to see some work that climatetrace.org had done around data centers because we all heard Eric Schmidt said tell Congress that AI would need by 2030 to use up to 95% of the world's current energy. And that I think we all found very shocking. But Climate Trace had done this work that showed that actually the big users of data centers um, had all moved to renewables for their data centers
Mm,
and was using AI quite sophisticatedly to use energy at the right times and to put energy back into the grid and things
mm,
like that. Um, it's it's not a cure-all, but it's better than I think some of the major worries that we had had about fossil fuels. Obviously, how long that will continue with an administration that is against renewables, we have to see. But for other countries, that might be hopeful. I personally worry more about the water, and again, I think that this is perhaps a an education issue. We use every time we ask a prompt of one of these LLMs, we're using a quarter of a liter of water. Um, and I know that everybody's working on this, but until they do, we perhaps should be more circumspect and train our children perhaps not to ask it what they should wear to school that day.
yeah, yeah. It goes into the AI literacy conversation. It's more about skill development and learning how to write prompts, but also judgment around when to use it and why, and the ramifications too.
Mhm.
Oftentimes goes missing in AI literacy, AI education circles. Well, Kate, you write about our shared responsibility to co-author the future of AI. And in practical terms, I'm wondering what role should all of us, should governments and companies and civil society organizations and everyday citizens each play, let's say over the course of the next decade, to ensure that AI development aligns with, in the US, democratic values and shared prosperity, to your point of, broadening the fruits that are enjoyed from the innovation economy, rather than reinforcing the existing inequalities. How are you thinking about that shared responsibility in the context of what institutional actors can do?
Sure. Well, one of the things that heartens me is that very many companies understand that having some good guardrails is essential for the way that they use artificial intelligence, and it doesn't have to be because they care about anything other than they care about their company and their bottom line.
Mm,
But what that means is that if you recognize there are dangers, for example, putting out a report to the wider world that's full of hallucinations, then you are going to put in some guardrails. And so I think that companies are now at the forefront of actually creating some real thought around how do we use AI? How do we train to use AI? How do we ensure that we continue training to use AI? How do we meet human beings where they are on their AI journey, as opposed to just thrusting the tools at them? We saw that in the last 2 years, and we've seen that. In fact, there was a HBR study that came out, I think, just yesterday or today, that showed that, everybody's was quite many people were quite excited to use the tools, and they used the tools and they went on and did other things. And then there's this sort of, okay,
mm,
I'm now exhausted because I'm doing all of this. So, so I think that companies have that role to play and are playing it in the absence in many countries of regulation.
mm.
Um, I think that government needs to regulate, as I said, particularly to protect our children. And But that means, again, a level of literacy around AI that many politicians don't have, and don't have time to. I feel sorry for politicians. They're being asked to think about this, and this, and this, and where does AI fit in? But I think what politicians really need to understand, is that if AI is going to dominate our future, the social contract between government and me, the citizen, is that you think about me first, and where am I and my children and my future what's that going to look like, and then wrap AI around that vision.
Mm.
Um,
In other words, you scaffold the AI consideration against all of the other
yes.
verticals, environmental, legislative assistance, the education legislative assistance, instead of having an AI legislative assistant, use the US-centric terminology, sort of scaffold it all across. I
Mhm.
did want to ask you, Kay, I remember during even my time at the forum, labor unions, and this idea that labor can be a vehicle for actually having participatory design around technology in general and AI. We had the International Trade Union Confederation. To this day, the quote still resonates with me. Tim Noonan had said that, unions are sometimes mischaracterized as technology Luddites, but in many parts of the world, and this was the federation that convenes the most labor unions globally, across the world, we're seeing more and more laborers ready to co-create the AI future for workers, and we've seen that certainly in the United States. And how are you seeing different kinds of institutions, labor unions, or works councils, or worker cooperatives even playing out in the AI discourse? And
Mhm.
how do you see that playing out in the future?
I think it's extraordinarily important, and an organization that represents the human being should be at the forefront of how the human being is going to work in the future with artificial intelligence. It's about that coexisting. It's like healthcare, you know. We, the patient, should be part of the conversation with our doctor about whether we want AI to be used, whether we want that doctor to be using AI in our care. And and I think that one of the things that has heartened me is that I have spoken in the last 2 years to very, very, very many societies that represent different types of workers. And really, they are at the forefront of making decisions about how AI is used in their particular piece of the labor puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in, the project that I was working on, your team over at the forum, I mean, this idea that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and that self-actualization at the top, if AI could help more people, certainly addressing the initial rungs of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety and security and stability, but then that top where we generally look to our identities around work and then our community to reach, is there a way to advance job quality and well-being through this technology and not just total factor productivity gains and GDP per capita increases and,
Mhm.
some of these traditional metrics. So that's
And I
always,
do
yeah.
think, Shailin, you know, one of the things that we haven't talked about,
Mm,
we've effectively talked about the global north.
sure.
What one of the things that we haven't talked about is the global south
Mm,
and the 2.6 billion people who have no connectivity and so can't actually move into whatever coexisting with AI that we are moving into, and what that does for our planet as we move into living, working, and playing with AI, and this large proportion of our world does
it
not.
won't.
But
Mm,
equally, I did hear some comments in Davos that it might be that, you know, we will get amazing growth companies in the global south because they are using AI in everything. And that would really challenge the status quo with legacy organizations. So lots more to see how this plays out.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thinking about the coexisting from the frame of well, as we've discussed, Kay, I mean the inequities that are existing and incumbent in our systems and societies, and seeing AI as a way to at least not make them worse is
Yeah.
something that I think a lot of leaders and thinkers are focused on, and certainly to make it better and to remedy some of those existing challenges. And that actually leads me to my next question here, which we've talked a little bit about the global state of play with a bit of more emphasis on the global north, as you had mentioned. But you've helped shape these global conversations around AI for quite some time. What are two or three governance mechanisms? We've talked about the sort of high road model for corporations if they follow those, but from a governance standpoint, what are some mechanisms at either the policy level or the multinational level that you believe are most urgent for ensuring that AI systems are deployed, appropriately so we can coexist with it?
Yeah, well, first is labeling of AI tools,
Mm,
whether it's a child's toy or and you know, just on that point of children's toys, um, some years ago now, Germany actually required all toys that had all types of a particular toy that had been on sale in Germany and had AI and had voice recognition and facial recognition to be destroyed. because they said it was a spying device and it was very easily hackable. And so, and that legislation came straight from their Nazi past, where people did spy on one's neighbors.
Mm,
And so the legislation was in place. And, AI is a fantastic surveillance tool. In the book, I write about what Hitler could have done had he had AI at his fingertips. So I think that labeling any AI product so that people who are going to use it can really understand each ramification of using it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is an important policy piece. I think that uh, creating curriculum from the very earliest age. I'm actually in conversation with early start learning groups, from the very earliest ages of, well, this toy might be a toy, but it isn't a human being. And really sort of having that education. You talked about literacy and intelligence. Let's teach the intelligence piece. And then I think workforce training is highly, highly important because we can't coexist if we don't know what we're coexisting with.
absolutely. Well, I know you have an exciting announcement for us towards the end of our discussion, but before we get to that final question, Kay, I wanted to bring in some of our audience members who have
Mm.
been sharing their questions with us. And the first one is a perfect springboard from the response you just gave, which is as a parent, AI labels on toys, i.e., putting the responsibility on the parent to decide if this is safe, feels like a nightmare. Are there places AI just shouldn't be?
Well, I think that that is actually part of the conversation that we need to be having. Again, this is why I wrote the books so that we can have this conversation. Um, I like to tell the story of 2 years ago, I had breast cancer. Fortunately, I'm better, so I'm very fortunate. But when my medical oncologist heard what I did for a living, she said, well, wouldn't it be amazing if we could create an AI that could help walk you through your journey with cancer? And I looked at her and I said, I think it'd be better if I helped you put AI into your back office, which freed up more of your time so that you, the human being, can walk me through my journey with cancer. And I think that that's one of the big questions of our time. What do we want AI to do? And what do we want humans to uniquely do? There was a article maybe a year ago in the New York Times where a surgeon said that AI could probably tell someone that they were going to die much better than he could because AI can fake empathy better than he can. But the question for us, and these are the questions of our time, in my view, is do we want an AI to tell us that we're going to die?
Wow. Yeah. It just goes to show the centrality of this participatory approach to AI governance. I mean, it really I know we had discussed this too, Kay, but I think of direct democracies like Switzerland, where the level of interface between citizens and government is just all that much closer. Um, but let me move on to another question from our audience here. This one is an interesting one. Is the singularity inevitable?
Um, oh gosh. I subscribe and I it's like putting your finger in the air and saying, well, the wind's coming from this direction, so yes. None of us know. None of us know. And don't let anybody suggest that they do have the answer. But I subscribe to the view that with the current LLMs, we will probably not get to AGI or beyond that super intelligence. It could well be that if we link what we have with other forms of AI, that we might get to AGI. But my fundamental view on this is that this decision should not be taken by scientists working for companies. It should be something that our government plays a part in, or the world's governments play a part in, because why would we create something that will be more intelligent than us without some regulation around it?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, looking through our questions here. Um, I think this is interesting in the context of the singularity question, Kay. So Al, as LLMs improve, hallucinations become more marginal, maybe more minimized. How can we think about humans' role when we lose our accuracy and knowledge advantage, especially for younger generations? I mean, even if we don't reach the AGI marker, with the maturation of AI in of itself, should we be thinking a little bit more broadly about maybe how we're going about education even beyond the skill development and AI literacy component into other dimensions, or what comes up for you in that question?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think that first of all, we should address the fact that however much better models have become, the hallucination rate hasn't gone down enormously. Some of the models still hallucinate up to 60%. Um, and um, and even the models that, wait and think and then provide you with an answer still hallucinate. So we're a long way off solving the hallucination problem. So that's that piece. But I think the core of this question is actually how do we make sure that our children are prepared to live in a world with an artificial intelligence that is in many ways cleverer than them, more suited for doing certain things than them, but in other ways really fallible, the hallucinations. And how do we make sure that our children continue to be able to think critically and not just trust the machine? And that's the task of those who educate, and it is the most critical task of those who educate for us as we go forwards.
Mm, yeah. Yep. And here's a question that certainly speaks to this being a fully hosted event. Um, AI has had its roots in public investments and R&D. Maybe a year or two ago, we hosted the director of the National Science Foundation for a conversation where he said, the AI that we're enjoying or fearing today is the result of public investments in R&D going back to the 1960s. So, how are you seeing either in the US or more globally, federal investments in research and development, public investments in research and development, factoring into this policy and governance where regulation tends to be a key area of emphasis. But what about that upstream R&D that is being subsidized and paid for using taxpayer resources through federal agencies, at least in the US, like the National Science Foundation or the National Institutes of Health or so forth? What are you seeing?
Yes, well, certainly the NIH did put into a lot of their grants the fact that they wanted to see responsible AI policies. And I did help CCAS which is a conglomerate of different universities and chemistry professors using AI to work out a responsible AI policy for the way that they were using AI in their research. But but I don't see. Um, I mean, investment now is coming from the private sector. It's coming from VCs. All the flotilla of AI companies that are out there, they're all VC invested. Um, what you are, where government money is being spent is in those sovereign AI
Mm,
systems. And, as the world turns, certainly Europe is saying, well, we are going to have to invest in our own AI systems and create them. And so one could imagine that an AI system built in the European Union might look quite different from the ones that we have from China or America. And in fact, um, I I know that it's going to cost water, but you might want to go and ask the same question of DeepSeek, one of the American models, and Mistral, which is the biggest European model. They will all give you a different answer based upon their worldview.
wow. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. The idea of these different sovereign AIs also having different responses based on the cultural and even the government documentation that undergirded their data models. I mean, I hadn't actually thought about that in the context of some of these, more global questions that you might ask. So we're nearing the end of our time here, Kay. So I think returning back to your book and reflecting on our whole conversation, we've had some discussions around areas of excitement and maybe hope or aspiration for how AI could help shape a better future of work, life, love, etc. And concerns and fears around how we work, how we love, how we play. um, what's next? What's next in this discussion? It's been 14 days since the book launched. How are you seeing, this conversation around coexisting with AI unfolding over the course of the next year, a couple of years, and what's next for you? And how can our audience members follow along?
Well, first of all, as I say, it's not to make me wealthy. It's that I would like everybody to buy a book and then give that book to the next person who you think needs to read it. And then so on and so on and so on, because that's the way that we build a movement. I have conversations, talk to other people about what you've heard today. Have conversations about this. We as humans need to take back a bit of the reins. So that's what I would hope for the book and this conversation. Uh, and because I think it's such an important topic that we deal with as soon as possible, the I am now in conversation to 7 stages of man plus an eighth stage, which is our future, a TV series that deals with those 8 stages. But for me, much more thrilling to look at a Broadway musical where we already have a producer and a director. And if I could get the world singing about coexisting with AI and then digging in, I'd be a happy woman.
Well, Shakespeare would be proud of that particular goal. Very exciting, Kay. And before we wrap up, do you have where should audience members find you out and about on your travels and learnings?
Yeah, so some book signings and mainly, I'm afraid, still doing in-camera conversations with companies to help them be on the right track and educating people generally about how to think about using AI tools wisely in their work and play, and maybe to leave them aside in their love life.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a great way to end our conversation. Kay, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us again, and congratulations on your new book, Coexisting with AI, Work, Love, Play in a Changing World. I'm excited to finish my read of it, and I'm excited to follow along on the conversation, including the hopeful TV series and the Broadway musical at that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been an utter pleasure.